Grady Connolly, welcome back to the Katie McGrady Show.
Thanks, Katie. It's always good to see you. Thanks for having me back.
I say welcome back. I've interviewed you for one of my podcasts. I don't know yet that I've gotten you on for the show. And this is where, now that I'm in the morning, I'm like, what do we want to talk about? And you posted something on Instagram. I texted you like right away. I saw you post it. I was like, oh my gosh, I saw the same thing. I've been trying to figure out an entry point to discuss this. Tell me about this survey data. Well, first off, introduce yourself to our audience. Who are you? What do you do? You're in Washington, D.C. in your studio, and then we'll get into it.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Katie. So my name is Grady Connolly. Like Katie said, I live in DC. I have a social media agency, Social Thomist. We represent a lot of Catholic public figures, priests, apostolates, and just helping them on social media. So social media is my bread and butter. I love it for all that it is. And yeah, I get to travel a bunch and meet a lot of amazing Catholics and just love the church and love the faith and doing what I can to bring people closer to it. So it's a real joy to be talking with you.
And you have a book coming out soon about this big that's when we've had you on. We had you on for the Napa Institute it was in studio. That's why I don't have
That's
spatial
right. In New
recognition of
York.
it. We were like in New York City for this. Tell me about the book that'll be coming out like soon, relatively soon.
Yeah. Yep. So I just finished a book with Ave Maria Press. It's on the basilicas of the United States. So I visited all 94 in the country, and it was quite the journey. It took about 4 years. And I wrote a book just basically sharing the story of the American church through the lens of these basilicas. There's just so many stories through these basilicas of just how immigrants and families just built the American church. And these structures that we have across the country kind of hold that history. So the book's going to come out in probably around beginning of October. And Cardinal Harvey from Rome wrote a forward for it. Monsignor Rossi from the Basilica here in DC also wrote a forward. So I'm very, very excited, very fortunate to have them involved. And it's been quite the journey. If you're interested, follow me on social media and you'll see all these amazing churches.
Yeah, that's how I first kind of noticed what you were doing. I was like, this guy's going everywhere and seeing these basilicas, which we have more than I think people realize.
Totally.
Not as many. I don't actually know that there's one in Louisiana. Is there a basilica in Louisiana?
There is.
There is. Where's
Yep.
that at?
You have a few. You have in Shreveport,
Okay.
uh, and then two in New Orleans.
Okay. That's right.
Yep.
Because you did drive. I think you drove to Beaumont. You passed
I
Little
did.
Lake Charles.
Which, fun
Beaumont's is my
fact,
favorite.
Beaumont's one of my favorite basilicas in the
Yes,
country.
it's so great. They've got the approved. We took our third graders there on a field trip because it was like, guys,
Beautiful.
we have a basilica an hour away. Why are we not going to this? Okay, we're not here to talk about basilicas. We'll have you back on the show for the book. You posted this article, and it was a survey result from Pew Research about how essentially the headline, Americans think their fellow Americans are horrible, which I find incredibly sad in this 200th birthday year that we've evolved as a society to a place of assuming the worst of each other. So tell me how this survey data kind of caught your eye and what you find initially concerning about it.
Yeah, when I saw it originally on Instagram, I actually read it twice because I was like, there's no way. And when I actually read the study, basically it was interviewing, tons of people from 25 different countries and trying to determine how they view their fellow citizens. America was at the top. So 53% of people said that their fellow citizens were morally bad people, which when I read that, I thought something's not right here. How did we get to this point? Just for context, too, Canada, our friends to the north, theirs was 7%. So you see the stark contrast of how Americans are viewing their neighbors, even their family members, their friends. And it really struck me. And I've been seeing a lot of this kind of coming out across social media and articles and podcasts that people are really miserable. But I think a lot of it is we've forgotten how to be human. We've forgotten how to connect with people. And this is really a symptom of it. We're seeing this kind of play out in the data. And I'm very concerned about it.
It's the phones, right? It's got to be the
Yep.
phones.
It's the phones. I do social media for a living.
Yeah. Me
It's
too.
one of those
Like we're
things.
in the same boat. Yeah.
I love it. There's a lot of benefits. There's a lot of perks. It can be a lot of fun. But unfortunately, when you live in your device, I think your actual relationships with people are going to suffer. The inability for people to really engage is, I think, the primary issue here. Like we've forgotten how to debate, how to dialogue, and just how to love on people. I always share that I have the greatest friends in the world. And I have some friends that are, right, Trump supporters, MAGA. And then I have some that are more traditional Republican. And then one of my best friends in the world is one of the most liberal people I know. And I've always said that it's been one of the greatest blessings of my life because it's really kind of removed or pulled back the curtain that this is all just one big political game that you see on the internet. Like, people are not bad. I would say if you asked 100 people, you might have one or two that are actually their intentions are bad. Everyone
Hmm.
else, their intentions aren't bad. There's bad ideas on how to get to a positive result. But to say that people are morally bad, I think is incredibly concerning. And frankly, I think we should reject that altogether. I think we should not be talking about our fellow neighbors like that.
Yeah, and they did it through the lens of this was the it was like through this lens of virtue and vice. But then, like, they didn't even really properly define terms. I will always stand by the Pew Research that was like, "Do you really believe in the real presence?" was so poorly phrased to just kind of confuse Catholics. Now, granted, what came out of that confusion was the Eucharistic revival, so I'll never hate it completely, but sometimes they phrase things weirdly in these research studies. And so, like, they essentially put up certain behaviors and said, "Do you think these behaviors are bad or good? And how many people around you do you think are doing these things? Or like, what do you think of people who are doing these things?" So it was gambling, homosexuality, extramarital affairs. That one was the one that, like, globally,
Yes.
everybody's like, that's a terrible thing. And I don't disagree that that's a terrible thing that a person would do. But can we look beyond the action to the person? That seems to have been lost. And marijuana use, whether it's morally acceptable, morally unacceptable. And then they take those data points and are like, okay, so this is how many people are doing it. And so you think these people who are doing those things are morally unacceptable, which was a word that's a wild word to me. This is my question. We're walking around thinking people are unacceptable, which means we can't accept them. What does that lead to in 10, 20, 30 years as a society that's even more, I imagine, online? It'll be a hologram in our hand by that point.
Yeah, it's terrible. I mean, I think what we're seeing is that human dignity is at the core of this whole issue. And, we talk about the unborn, we talk about the elderly as being people who are susceptible to these kind of attacks on human dignity and the respect for human life. But that also includes our everyday Americans.
Mhm.
And I think this shift that's happening in the public where we're allowing the media and allowing politicians and just things with bias basically to tell us how to view our neighbor. I think we need to reject that. Who is this media outlet to tell me how to view someone of a different idea? I
Mhm.
love one of my favorite things of all time is the relationship between Antonin Scalia and Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Yeah.
One of my favorite things, and something that Scalia said was, "I disagree or I attack ideas, not people, because
Mm.
there are very good people who have very bad ideas." And I think that's basically the core of what we need to rekindle is we need to talk about ideas. There are some very bad ideas. For example, I'm a big free market guy. I love it because I love human flourishing. I love business. But do I believe that everyone who voted for Mamdani in New York is a bad person? Of course not. Like, why would I think that because somebody has a different view of how the world should go, that they're bad people? I know that they may have voted for somebody or a policy because they think it's going to help people flourish.
Mhm.
That's the core. We have more in common than we realize, that there's a lot of similarity and we really do care for people. So let's debate. Let's explore how we can actually carry that out. So yeah, Antonin Scalia, he's kind of our role model. I wonder what he would say if he was still alive and just seeing
Yeah.
how the world has developed and the problems that we're seeing. I think he would have a lot of opinions on it.
Yeah. It's interesting you bring up Mamdani. He so he didn't go to the installation of Archbishop Hicks at the beginning of February, and Cardinal Dolan kind of called him out on it. He was like, "I was really disappointed by that. I thought that was bad form." And then he showed up to the St. Patrick's Day mass and parade. Now, part of it, I'm sure, was maybe a bit of a political calculation, right? Like, you got to get right with the Archdiocese of New York. They are definitely power players in the world of Manhattan. But Archbishop Hicks said something really, I thought, quite, quite deft. It was very, very smart the way he put it. He was like, look, we're both at the beginning of our leadership in this city. Like, we're both figuring it out. We're figuring out how to work together, how to have these conversations, how to navigate this relationship. And he didn't come from a place of like, I can't believe he didn't come and I'm glad he came today, which I'm glad that Cardinal Dolan called out the bad behavior because I think it needed to be called out. But he didn't like then attack the man or attack some of the actual ideas. It was more just like, look, we make nice with each other in this city. It's a melting pot of an archdiocese, of a political life. I find when we disagree with a person's ideas, Well, then you discuss the idea, and it's your job then to try to convince them of your position or to have the humility to listen a bit to what they say. And these ad hominem attacks that happen from both sides of the aisle purely because I dislike the person, well, then maybe you have to admit that you dislike them as a person. And that is sinful to a point. Like, you can have friends, you can have community, you can have preferences of people you'd like to sit with at a dinner party. But we're not supposed to walk around as Catholics and be like, "Oh, I hate that person." Like, that is not a charitable approach.
Of
Why
course.
do you think we do that then? Like, we know, okay, this is sinful to hate my neighbor, and I've been conditioned by the algorithm to do so. I know it's wrong, but sometimes I just really like to dislike that person. So how do we fix that so we're not walking around just thinking everybody's terrible all the time?
Yeah. Well, first of all, to your comments about Archbishop Hicks and Mamdani, I did see that clip and I thought it was great. One, it showed Archbishop Hicks's humility. But again, like, cheers to Mamdani. I'm glad he went and engaged, and that's what we want, right?
Yeah.
That's the whole point. But I do think that the word there you mentioned is humility. It is kind of, I think, the ultimate humility to be able to listen to people with real intention of actually hearing what they're saying. It's
Mm.
unbelievable to me the inability to actually listen to people. I think we get so into our own ideas that we're set on what we believe. And in these conversations, it's just about winning the argument and about proving our point. And no one's actually listening to why people believe what they believe. Now, it doesn't dismiss that maybe this is a bad idea that we're discussing, but it is our obligation to humble ourselves and to actually engage in the discussion, to actually explore it. I think to a next step kind of above that is admitting when we're wrong and admitting when
Mm.
we've learned something from someone else. I say all the time, my best friend who's very progressive, he calls me out on stuff and I call him out on stuff. And that's okay. And it's good and being able to say, actually, you know what, you're right. So I think part of that softens conversations. So that humility I think is good. I think the devil doesn't really care how he gets us to fall into pride. Like, he doesn't care how he does it, even if it's over something holy, right? Or something just. If he gets you to fall into pride, he's won. So I really think we have to be very aware of that. And even within the church, I think I'm very concerned personally about a lot of the division within the church itself, especially on the internet and just how it's being perpetrated, that we're kind of creating these silos of Catholicism and kind of pitting each other against, different ideas or ways of worship. And I just think it's so unhealthy that
Mhm.
we really have lost the relationship with Christ and we're just focused on kind of politicizing everything in our lives. So yeah, these are just kind of some thoughts I'm having as we're kind of going through this.
Yeah. I find it most you mentioned though, like, people can't admit when they've made a mistake or when they're wrong. I saw this thing the other day. I had definitely I read it was like a Reels caption, and the Reel and somebody had gone in and edited the caption. So I'd liked it, and I remember thinking, like, the way they phrased that was weird, was wrong, but I still liked, like, the general thing that they were discussing. And then it popped back up in my algorithm because of the way our phones work. Like, you're not choosing anything that you see. It is all being fed to you based off of how long you stared at something the prior time you were scrolling, which when you realize how much we're being manipulated, you wanna throw it in the river. But I saw the reel again, and it was different. It had been edited. The caption had been edited. And nobody knew that it had been edited. Like, you can just go edit it. And I was like, "I are we doing that with opinions that we've presented?" Or, like, I posted this thing yesterday, so I don't know if you've noticed. Notre Dame has announced that they are changing their tuition structure for families who make under $60,000 a year, under $150,000 a year, and under $200,000 a year. So basically trying to make Notre Dame more affordable. I tweeted out, "I think this is a game changer for Catholic higher education." Because Notre Dame, whether you like them or not, are a leader in Catholic education. But all I tweeted was, "It's a game changer." And a couple people were like, "I kind of disagree with that. Like, it's not that big of a deal. Only 9% of people get accepted. Not that many students are actually there. Just because they're loud doesn't mean that they're." So I had to, like, go in and clarify. And their push on me forced me to hone in some of my thoughts. And I wonder if what's happening is rather than, like, try to develop our opinions, we can just so quickly edit them or delete stuff or pretend like we never said it wrong. in the first place. And so there's no ownership of having to wrestle or clarify because the internet isn't actually forever anymore. I can just modify something or delete it. And unless a person took a screenshot of it, like nobody necessarily needs to know that I was. And I think showing people the wrestling is actually important to showing people our own fallibility. And nobody wants to be fallible anymore. Nobody wants to have said, like, yeah, I had to learn. We just all want to be good or smart or correct immediately.
Yeah, I could not agree with you more. And the word you just said, infallible, I actually use that word a lot when I talk about this, especially when we're talking about kind of these personalities we see online, that we see them as infallible, that we just need to kind of align with a group or align with a person, and they just become kind of our God in the sense of they can say no wrong, they can do no wrong, and we're just going to go along with it. And I think that's incredibly dangerous. We always talk about the pursuit of truth. And I kind of have come to question, are we really like what does that actually look like? Because pursuing truth always means you're going to stumble across things where you're wrong and you have to
Mhm.
kind of course correct. That's just part of it. So if we have this delusion that we're always right, we're actually not pursuing truth at all. We're just
Mhm.
trying to confirm what we believe. It's just confirmatory bias. So I think we really have to like pivot the way we view this pursuing of truth. I think also Cardinal Fernandez recently cautioned against, especially in the Catholic space, reading blogs or following social
Mhm.
media influencers as kind of our infallible guide of faith. And, people who have no formal training in theology, that are saying the Pope this and bishops that and cardinals that. And you know, they're almost talking like ex cathedra. Like they are making their proclamation of what truth is. And I see this leading into a lot of kind of dangerous territory where people are not placing their trust in the magisterium and the church and our Holy Father. They're like, well, we're going to kind of clarify ourselves or do things ourselves. And frankly, I've just gotten tired of it.
Mhm.
I think obedience and submission to the church is such a gift. Like
Mhm.
some of these things, you want to have these discussions, you want to talk about things with people, but also what a joy when we can just go to the church and see what does she actually tell us,
Mhm.
And then, ultimately too, as we talk about it, like doing it with love, doing it with the love of Christ. It's unfortunate that when you hear a lot of people speak, especially online, sometimes I'll listen to an hour, conversation and never once they talk about the love of God. And I think it almost has become like oh, that's just like kind of cheesy, like kumbaya
Mhm.
Jesus stuff. And it's like, well, no, that's the whole message of
That's
the
what we're
faith.
about. Yeah.
Of course there's suffering, of course there's sacrifice and pain and sin. And that's all there, of course. But if that's all we focus on, we've completely missed the point. So, yeah, I think kind of restoring that humility, looking to the church for her guidance, but then also, we don't have to be experts on everything, right? Like
Yeah.
sometimes we can be wrong and we can look to others for that kind of support and guidance.
Yeah. It came out like a year before COVID, The Death of Expertise by Tom Nichols, who I
Yeah.
think he writes for The Atlantic. And I'm just waiting for the update of like, are you going to write another one of these? Because I think we need an update of like, it's okay to not be omniscient. Andrew Laubacher, who works for Humanality, who's like his entire thing these days is getting people off their phones to go live human life. And I'm sometimes jealous of those people. Like, I could, like, my career literally prevents me from doing that. Like, I have to have the internet, I have to have technology. This is how we promote these wider conversations. I think that's a good thing. But he described our phones as giving us the illusion of omniscience. They are the apple from the tree of knowledge. And we were never supposed to be able to know all things all the time, all at once, and then be able to spout opinions about it nonstop, which only leads us to a hatred of the person with a different opinion who's far away from me rather than the person I'm in relationship with who has a different opinion, or the person I'm in relationship and so then I can see them as God sees them because I also have a relationship with God. And so there's, I'm sure in every cheesy youth group experience, right? They talk about the vertical relationship with Jesus and the horizontal relationship with each other. It's like, yeah, that's literally the structure of the 10 Commandments. And there's none of this anymore. And there's certainly none of this. Grady, I want you to write a book about this. Can you just do that for us? Can you like analyze all
That
this?
is something I'm already kind of thinking about is
Good.
like,
Okay, good.
how do we look at the future through the lens of a digital age, through this lens of just politics being in our face all day. It's definitely something I'm exploring. It's a big topic, and it affects all of us in some way.
For sure. Grady, where can we follow you so we can keep up with what you're saying about it all?
Yeah, at the Grady Connolly on Instagram. That's kind of my primary. I'm also Facebook and LinkedIn as well. And yeah, definitely check out my book when it comes out. My website is gradyjconnolly.com. I write different Substacks and stuff there as well.
Awesome. We'll post it all. Thanks so much for taking the time, my friend. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Katie. God bless.